In the brutal, unforgiving theater of the Pacific War, a single soldier, left for dead, could be written off as a tragic but acceptable loss. But what if that one soldier refused to be forgotten? What if he decided that the war for him was not over? This is not a story of a massive army or a decisive naval battle. This is the story of one man, a man who, when faced with utter abandonment and certain death, chose to fight back. This is the story of when one soldier was left behind, and the devastating 3-day solo war he waged that shocked the entire Japanese high command. It is the spring of 1942. The Philippine Islands are falling. On the ravaged island of Cebu, amidst the chaos of the American-Filipino retreat, a lone figure, a Filipino intelligence scout named Faustino L. Bacalso, is about to be cut off. His war and his legend are just beginning. To understand the sheer impossibility of Bacalso's stand, we must first understand the situation. By April 1942, General Douglas MacArthur had already been ordered to evacuate to Australia, leaving General Jonathan Wainwright with the impossible task of defending the Philippines with starving, ill-equipped, and outnumbered forces. The 3rd, 15th, and 16th Japanese Infantry Divisions were sweeping through the Visayan Islands with terrifying speed and efficiency. Their tactics were simple and brutal: overwhelming force, rapid encirclement, and psychological terror. Our main character, Faustino L. Bacalso, was not a regular infantryman. He was a sharp, resourceful scout attached to the 3rd Battalion, 82nd Infantry Regiment of the Philippine Commonwealth Army. His job was to be the eyes and ears of his unit, to move silently, observe the enemy, and report back. He knew the rugged, jungle-choked terrain of Cebu's highlands like the back of his hand. This intimate knowledge of the land would become his greatest weapon. His unit, like so many others, was in a desperate, fighting retreat towards the western coast, hoping for an evacuation that was becoming less likely with every passing hour. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, cordite, and despair. The order was simple: disengage and fall back. But in the confusion of a nighttime withdrawal under constant enemy mortar fire, the thin thread connecting a scout to his unit can be easily severed. On the night of April 12, 1942, Bacalso's battalion was executing a perilous retreat through the Talisay Corridor. The Japanese 173rd Infantry Regiment had established a series of swift, aggressive roadblocks, cutting the main trails. In the pitch black, illuminated only by the sporadic flash of a star shell or the orange glow of a burning village, chaos reigned. The sound of Japanese Nambu light machine guns chattered incessantly, mixed with the desperate return fire of American-made Springfield rifles. Bacalso, operating at the very tip of the column, had been sent forward to probe for a safe path. For 2 hours, he crept through the dense undergrowth, his senses on a razor's edge. He found a route, a narrow game trail that bypassed a major Japanese position. But when he returned to the designated rally point, he found it deserted. The ground was churned up by boot prints and vehicle tracks, all leading west. His heart sank. In their haste to avoid encirclement, his comrades had been forced to move out. He was alone. Dawn on April 13th broke over a silent but occupied forest. Bacalso, hidden in a canopy of thick banyan trees, surveyed his new reality. He saw not just a few stragglers, but entire companies of Japanese troops, the advance elements of the 173rd, now consolidating their hold on the area. Truck convoys rumbled down the dirt roads. Patrols of a dozen or more soldiers, their bayonets fixed, moved methodically through the jungle below him. He was now 30 miles behind the rapidly shifting front lines. His options were grim: surrender and face almost certain execution, attempt a near-suicidal trek through dozens of miles of enemy-controlled territory, or he could do what he was trained to do. He could fight. His arsenal was meager: one M1903 Springfield rifle, 47 rounds of .30 to 6 ammunition, 2 fragmentation grenades, a bolo knife, and his canteen half full of water. This was what stood against an army. His decision was not one of grand, patriotic fervor, but of a cold, calculated resolve. If he was going to die, he would make his death expensive for the enemy. He would become a ghost, a phantom in the hills that would haunt the Japanese rear. By 900 hours, his war began. A 5-man Japanese patrol, believing the area secure, was moving carelessly along a stream bed. Bakulso, positioned on a rocky outcrop 50 yards away, took a deep breath, let it half out and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the Springfield echoed through the valley. The lead scout dropped. The other 4 scrambled for cover, confused. They were not expecting resistance. Bakulso fired twice more, the bullets snapping through the leaves around the panicked soldiers before melting back into the jungle. He didn't stay to fight. He hit and he vanished. The initial success was a flicker of hope in an ocean of darkness, but the Japanese response was swift and brutal. By noon, a full platoon was scouring the area. They knew a sniper was operating, but they believed it was a small, isolated group of holdouts. Bakulso's world shrunk to a few square miles of jungle, a deadly chessboard where he was the lone king. He moved constantly, using animal trails and dry creek beds. He drank from morning dew collected on leaves and ate what little wild fruit he could find. Sleep was a luxury he could barely afford, snatched in 20-minute increments, his hand never leaving his rifle. The second day, April 14th, was a test of endurance. The Japanese, now infuriated by this persistent thorn in their side, brought up a 70 Type 92 battalion gun. They began shelling the wooded hillsides indiscriminately. The deafening roar of the explosions tore through the tranquility of the jungle, sending shards of shrapnel and splintered wood flying in all directions. Bakulso was forced to take shelter in a small, muddy ravine, the concussions shaking the very earth beneath him. For 3 brutal hours he was pinned down, the world a cacophony of noise and terror. This was the crisis. This was the moment where any rational man would have broken. The sheer, overwhelming force being brought to bear on one man was ludicrous. As the shelling ceased, the infantry moved in again, this time with a tighter cordon. They were methodical, flushing out every possible hiding spot. Bakulso, his uniform torn, his face caked with mud and sweat, found himself cornered in a small grove of bamboo. He could hear their guttural shouts, the rustle of their uniforms just meters away. He was down to his last grenade and maybe 20 rounds of ammunition. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped him. This was it. The impossible stand was about to end. He prepared his grenade, his finger on the pin, ready to take as many of them with him as he could. He was one man against an empire. The odds were not just impossible, they were absurd. But Faustino Bakulso was a scout, and a scout's greatest weapon is not his rifle, but his mind. As he listened to the enemy closing in, he realized their tactics were predictable. They were beating the bush, expecting him to break cover and run. He decided to do the opposite. He would not run. He would attack through them. In a moment of sheer, audacious genius, he formulated a plan of breathtaking risk. He waited until the main search line had passed his position, leaving only a 2-man rear security team slightly behind. He moved with a predator's silence, his bolo knife in his hand. The first Japanese soldier never knew what happened. The second had only a moment to widen his eyes before Bakulso was upon him. It was quick, brutal, and silent. He had now acquired a Type 100 submachine gun, extra ammunition, and most importantly, 2 Japanese Type 97 fragmentation grenades. Instead of fleeing away from the search, he began to move parallel to it and then ahead of it. He was now hunting the hunters. He used the captured grenades to create diversions, throwing one far to the enemy's left flank as the platoon scrambled to respond to the new threat. He set up a hasty ambush on their expected path of advance. When a squad of 8 soldiers rushed past his position, he opened up with the Type 100, the weapon's distinctive ripping sound a shocking surprise in the jungle. He expended a full 30-round magazine, sowing chaos and confusion, before once again disappearing into the green gloom. He was no longer a target. He was a phantom, a force of nature. The Japanese platoon, convinced they were engaging a company-sized guerrilla unit, broke off their search and called for heavier reinforcements. In their minds, they were not fighting one man. They were fighting a legion. On the morning of April 15th, the third day, a strange quiet had fallen over the sector. The Japanese had pulled back, establishing a defensive perimeter and waiting for the promised reinforcements. This lull gave Bakulso the opening he needed. Using every ounce of his survival and fieldcraft skills, he began a grueling, week-long journey west, moving only at night, avoiding all contact. He eventually stumbled into the new, fragile Allied lines on April 22nd, emaciated, dehydrated, but alive. His story, initially met with disbelief, was soon corroborated by intercepted Japanese radio traffic. The 173rd Regiment had reported stiff and skillful resistance from a determined enemy force in the rear, estimating they had engaged a company of well-trained Filipino irregulars. They reported over 30 casualties, killed and wounded, from the actions of what they believed was a significant partisan unit. They never knew the truth. They had been fought to a standstill, their supply lines harassed, and their morale shaken by a single, determined soldier. For his actions, Faustino L. Bakulso was awarded the Distinguished Service Star, one of the Philippines' highest military honors, for conspicuous courage and gallantry at the risk of his life. His three-day solo war became a legend, a spark of hope in the dark early days of the war. It proved that one man, armed with nothing but courage, ingenuity, and a will of iron, could defy an army. The story of Faustino Bakulso is a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit when faced with annihilation. It is a forgotten chapter, a small but incredibly bright flame in the vast darkness of a world at war. His legacy is not just in the casualties he inflicted, but in the undeniable proof that even in the face of certain death, one can choose to fight on. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.